Okay, good morning. So I think yesterday we had discussed about the clear questions on Plato and bit about Aristotle. So I think we had discussed important theories of Aristotle. What are the important theories of Aristotle? Theory of slavery, theory of citizenship, and you have theory of revolution or etc. Now let's look into certain questions in these areas. What has come in the exam? Second, you can take down this question and let us see how to approach this particular question. Take down to what extent Aristotelian ideas to what extent the Aristotelian ideas have contributed to development of modern day constitutional democracy. To what extent Aristotelian ideas have contributed to development of modern day constitutional democracies. So this was asked for how many marks? 20 marks. Okay. So the question is asking your opinion. Okay. So they are asking what? One keyword is what? Aristotle's ideas. And the other keyword where he is linking to development of what? Constitutional democracies. Be exactly modern day constitutional democracy. So when you write your answer, and that too this is asked for how many marks? 20 marks. So how would you structure your answer? What will be the structure you will be using here? Tell me what is the introduction you can write. What is it? So instead of writing same thing here, Aristotle footnotes applied to Aristotle, write something more relevant to question. One, you can say Aristotle is considered as the father of political science, and Aristotle's book Politics, it is considered as one of the best treatise which has been ever written on statecraft. Something like that you can give as your introduction. Then what will you write? First you say modern day constitutional democracies. Explain what are their features. In modern day constitutional democracies, they are premised on what? Rule of law, uh, freedom of speech, expression, civil liberties. Then you can say modern day constitutional democracies also is based on the idea of separation of powers. Then it is also based on the active participation of people in the democratic process. Very important. So you write certain what are the features. Now you go and say that many of these features have evolved through Aristotelian ideas. Now you have to write about land. Anybody has parked your vehicles on the left side? So you can now link which of those Aristotelian ideas have contributed. So you can say Aristotle was one of the earliest scholars to stress on what? Rule of law. Because he says now what? Collective wisdom any day is better than wisdom of any one person, single person. Aristotle also speaks about civic republicanism, means active participation of people in political process. And you can say Aristotle also has given the idea of citizenship And you can say modern day constitutional democracy also premise on identifying who are citizens. Then you can also write that Aristotle also you can see brings the role of middle path, means golden mean rule. So this also you can say this is the basis of modern day democracy. They are also based on what? Not extremity, but based on balancing different elements. So for example, you can have bicameral legislatures. So if you look at his polity is also a mixture of democracy and aristocracy. But then you are going to write in your answer, however, one cannot completely say that Aristotelian ideas are in sync with modern day democracies. There are many ideas of Aristotle which are contrary to it. One you can read, he believed that state is perfect, and he says individual will not have any rights against the state. Second, you can speak about his defense of slavery, where he said some are born to rule, some are born to serve. This goes against the modern day idea of what you can say an egalitarian society. Third, his idea of citizenship is based on exclusion. He had excluded old people, women, children from getting status of slaves, from getting status of citizenship. Fourth, you can say that Aristotle had considered democracy as more of a perverted form of government. He had considered democracy as rule of the poor in that regard. But in modern day times, you can say we believe that democracy is one of the, or you can use the statement of Winston Churchill, who said that democracy might be the worst form of government, but it is the best until you have an alternative. So here you can say that these ideas of Aristotle are not in sync with modern day. You can write that. You can write it in the initial part. So once you write, that's done. Slavery means when we wrote slavery, we have included point of inequality. So then you conclude your answer by saying that in spite of these limitations, one cannot deny Aristotle's contribution to modern day constitutional democracies. His ideas has inspired the other scholars such as whom you can write Hannah Arendt, who speak about also say Locke. Hence you can say that he continues to be have a special place in field of political science as father of something like that. So understood, if you get your structure correct, most of your answer flow will be good. And you can also bring a lot of points in your answer. That's the main point. You have to bring a lot of points in your answer. You have to bring a lot of arguments in your answer. So that's why I said everything will depend on how you interpret the question. If you interpret the question correctly, you know the keywords correctly, most of your answers will come out well. And rest is all about what you have to articulate it well in that regard. Got it? Yeah, I will not write what are the features of modern day. If it's 10 marker, even more brief. Okay, 10 marker I won't explain. I'll just mention, okay, these ideas are there, these are ideas are going against. Got it? So you have to be able to balance it, means based on number of marks they're asking. But again, see, no, optional always articulation is important, ability to articulate well. Okay, because this is social science subject. You can't write like yeah, GS paper. You have to bring bit of dialogues or etc. in between. Now, one more question, what is there on Aristotle, which they have asked in 2017. This is regarding revolution. They have told everywhere inequality is the cause of revolution. Everywhere inequality is the cause of revolution. And this is a statement made by Aristotle. And they're asking you to comment. 15 marks. This was asked in 2017. So yeah, if you see this question, it is linked to which theory of Aristotle? This theory of revolution. And they're asking for how many marks? 15 marks. And if you look at the question, it's not just Aristotle theory of revolution. They've given a context. Context in the sense there is a dialogue. Means they are telling everywhere. Who is telling? Aristotle is saying everywhere inequality is the cause of revolution. So when I break down this answer, when you write, first I will write about Aristotle. Same thing. Aristotle in his book Politics speaks about the idea of revolution. Then in my answer, I have to tell what is revolution according to Aristotle. According to Aristotle, even a small change in the constitution represents revolution. Then I'll go on to write what are the causes he says about revolution. He speaks about general causes and particular causes. But I'll not go and expand here general causes. If I want, I'll just mention few things. Then I'll have to write more on this thing, explaining how, why he says everywhere inequality is root cause of revolution. One, you can say what he says, if you take different types of governments like monarchy, aristocracy, or in democracy, in all the systems, what is common cause of revolution? It is inequality. So for example, you can say in monarchy, when within the dynasty, there will be perception of inequality. Why? Because those who have not got the kingdom, they'll always conspire to bring down the government. Or you can see in aristocracy, there will be multiple groups in that regard where power is distributed. When they feel that they are not getting the benefits, they will rebel against it. Or you can see in democracy, it can be common people. When there is a lot of economic stress, etc., when economic inequality widens, it will be a cause of revolution. Now here I am not going to write a counterpoint. I am not going to write a counterpoint because I completely agree with what Aristotle is saying. So I am going to just substantiate. And how I am going to substantiate? I am going to give current examples. So I will tell that this is not Popper telling, not somebody telling, it's me telling. I will tell that what? When we look at human history, what Aristotle is telling is true, because throughout human history we have seen that any form of inequality anywhere in the world has led to political instability. I'll give example. Take the American Revolution, look at the French Revolution, look at the Chinese Revolution. All these revolutions were connected to what? One or the other form of inequalities. It can be political inequalities, it can be social inequalities, it can be economic inequalities. Because when inequality is there, this leads to what? People feeling that they are not getting the benefits of the state, and the state is bound to lose its political obligation. I am going to introduce the concept of political obligation here, and that is what has happened, I will say, in contemporary world. When you look at Arab Spring, where you can say the governments collapsed. Why? Because there was growing inequality. And even that is what Thomas Piketty also says, that if there is inequality will erode the legitimacy that is enjoyed by the government. So hence Aristotle's books Politics, it serves as a starting point of understanding statecraft, and that is why he is considered as one of the greatest political thinkers and is rightly called as the father of political science. More weightage, because see, this was a question which I had written in 2017. This was a paper I attended. So in this paper only I got 154 in PSIR. So here when I wrote the exam, I didn't have any content. I now at least I know what is general cause particular. That time when I wrote, I didn't even know that. I only knew general cause particular cause. I didn't know about what he tells regarding monarchy, what he tells regarding aristocracy. I never wrote all that. I only wrote general cause particular cause. The entire my answer had written about present times. Because see, here is a question. There is no other theoretical aspect, right? So let me to counter it. Why will I counter it? Where do you counter it? Where you counter it? Where you agree that there are different perspectives on it. But if you look at this is a question, this is not a question based on perspectives, right? So where do you can bring different perspectives? That let us say they give a question. State is an instrument of exploitation. That is a Marxist perspective. Yeah, I'll counter it by also writing about liberal perspective, other perspective. But if you look at this question, it is a statement made by Aristotle regarding a context. I agree with this context, and I'll substantiate by bringing my own examples and my own arguments, and I'm going to conclude my answer. Got it? So you also have to gauge that when you look at a question, you'll have to know whether this question requires any kind of antithesis. And don't think that in all questions you have to write antithesis. Okay, for example, tomorrow they'll ask a question, or they've already asked previous year question, explain John Locke as the father of liberalism. No, you don't sit and write, he's not the father of liberalism. You understand? Now when you say I will write criticism for it, why you will write criticism? They're not asking you to write, they're telling you just explain. To explain means first you have to tell what is liberalism, then you need to connect how this fellow's ideas evolved. So there if you go and tell I will write criticism of Locke, why will you write? You understood? So here also if you are telling you want to write to counter him, what is the point you get? So can you argue that no, inequality is not cause of revolution? Yeah, there may be other causes of revolution, but inequality is also one of the main causes, and he is not telling that inequality is the only cause of revolution. The statement only says that what? Everywhere inequality is a cause of revolution, and that is true. When you take even today's world, take for example, collapse of Sheikh Hasina's government in Nepal, Gen Z protest. Now everything is all connected to what? Inequality. Got it? So here the component of my perspective means current examples will be more. Yeah, 1/3 of my answer I am going to explain Aristotle's idea of revolution. 2/3 of my answer I am going to write about my own ideas and how it is there. Now this was one question they asked. Now in 2015 they had asked a standard question, that is what? Comment on the concept, Aristotle's conception of equality. Comment on Aristotle's conception of equality. So this has been asked for 10 marks. So obviously you have to write in how many words? You have to write within 150 words. Now tell me what is your approach of writing this answer. I don't want the content, I just need the approach. So compared to the previous question and this question, here they are asking me to comment. Comment ka matlab my opinion on it. Okay, regarding what? Regarding Aristotle's concept of what? Equality. Now you can say, sir, I have not read about his concept of equality. No, just think about what is his ideas on equality. First I need to write, no, to comment on it, first of all I have to write, tell what is Aristotle's idea of equality. So obviously when I introduce my answer, I am going to write about Aristotle. I am going to write Aristotle, the father of political science, has written in one of the important work called as Politics. In his works, we will get to understand his idea of equality. Now next I have to write about what is his idea of equality. What is his idea of equality? He promotes the idea of proportionate equality. What do you mean by proportionate equality? He says treating equals equally, unequals unequally. And you can say his idea of equality is reflected in his various theories, such as what? Slavery, citizenship. And Aristotle believed that what? Inequality was natural. I will use the dialogue where he said, from hour of birth, some are born to rule, others are born to serve. Understood? And I also read Aristotle, an idea of equality. It was more, you can say, procedural equality to build a meritocratic society. It did not involve any kind of substantiative ideas of equality. Then I am also going to write a comment saying that scholars like Rousseau have argued that what means, he told, Aristotle told inequality is natural, but all inequality are not natural. There are certain natural inequalities, there are certain socially created inequalities which Aristotle has not recognized. Second, you can say that Aristotle's idea of equality is incompatible with the modern day idea of social justice. Because if you look at Rawls, what he says about any idea of any form of inequality can be only justified if it is benefiting the vulnerable or the weaker sections of society. And I am going to end my answer. Understood? So here I have not just written about what is Aristotle's idea of equality, I have commented on it. Comment ka matlab, I have brought my perspective also on this answer. So what happens in many times in exam, what people tend to do, they just write what is Aristotle's idea of equality, they don't comment on it. You understood? So you'll have to know that balance, where to comment, where to write. So here you can say you can bring counter perspectives. So see, it's like you saw a movie, somebody is asking you to comment on the movie. So when you comment on a movie, you're not just going to write what was there in the movie, you're going to tell whether you liked the movie, what you didn't like the movie, you're going to bring your assessment. Same thing you'll have to do here. So I made use of whose arguments? Arguments of Rousseau and Rawls, and I've ended my answer. Here I don't need to explain a lot. Why? Because I have to sum up my answer within 150 words. But my answer will not only explaining what is Aristotle. Yeah, here 2/3 of my answer will be Aristotle's idea of equality, 1/3 will be my reflections on it. Understood? So that is what you have to do when you read a theory while revising, etc. You will also have to bring your reflections on it. Reflections means, okay, if I'm going to analyze it, what else I can write about? There you can make use of PYQs. Why? PYQs will help you think in those directions. But once you write an answer, your point should be ready. So because in exam you can't sit and think there, it should be already ready. Yeah, Rousseau says that all inequalities are not natural. In, let us say, physical disability, this is a natural inequality. But slavery, okay, means he did not directly say, but I'm just explaining what Rousseau might meant. Slavery is not natural. Nobody is born as a slave. Or you can say caste system is not natural. These are all socially created, and it is possible to address the problems such as what socially created inequalities. But if you look at Aristotelian things, Aristotle never had this idea of that, you know, what is natural and what is socially created. He considered all forms of inequality is natural. So for him, slavery was natural, because that is how he defends slavery, right? He says it is natural, it is beneficial. So that is where we disagree with Aristotle. Now, this is one more area, means they're asking questions on his equality. So if you see 2021, 2022, 2015, the trend is that they're not directly asking questions, they're asking, you know, the inner meanings, like write about his equality, how he shaped modern day. But if you go before 2015, that is 2014, 2011, the questions are pretty more straightforward. Means standard themes. Standard themes is what? Most of the question used to revolve around Aristotle's view on state. So you can see this is one question which revolves around Aristotle's view of state. So here it says that you can take down the question as state is a creation of nature. State is a creation of nature and man by nature is a political animal. Man by nature is a political animal. Aristotle. And they're asking you to comment on it, sorry, discuss, and this is for 15 marks. 15 marks, I think 10 marks, 150 words. Yeah, so how will you address this question? Okay, same way in 2002 also they've asked a question, police by nature and it is prior to individual, comment. So more or so the question remains the same. Now tell me, how will you address this question? Okay, one, in your introduction, you can say that Aristotle belongs to the Socratic tradition, or you can also use the word called as organic theory of state. This is a keyword, what you can bring in your answer, that is organic theory of state. Then, what is his view? Already they have given his view. See, this is where you are deviating away from. Now, what is the mistake he is doing is that he is trying to just write whatever he knows about state. No, be more specific. There is a context they have given. So they are telling state is a creation of nature. What do you mean by that? What did Aristotle mean by that? So what Aristotle argues is that state has evolved naturally out of nature. So Aristotle says that if you go by chronology, he says man comes first, state comes after. But if you go by teleology or logic, he says that it is state which comes first. Why? Because then you write your point. Because he says that it is only under the state that man can attain self-actualization. So state has developed naturally to meet the needs of the man. Then you write the dialogue is where he says state comes for the sake of life, it continues for the sake of good life. Then you have to say that man by nature is a political animal. What does he mean by that? Meaning man needs states for his survival. Man always wants to live in a group. He says that one who lives outside the state should be either god or beast. So hence for Aristotle, state is natural. State serves the purpose of the man to bring what? Self-actualization of an individual. But then, since it is discussed, I can also now bring alternative perspective. But however, you can say that Aristotelian arguments have been countered by whom? One, I will write the social contract perspective. So in social contract perspective, that is Hobbes, Locke and Rousseau argue that state is not natural. State is a human creation. State has been created to meet necessities of human beings. State should not be equated with God, or state is not natural in that regard. Second, I am going to bring in my perspective because Aristotle has also argued that what man by nature is a political animal, man by nature is a social animal. This has been rejected by liberals, by John Locke, who gives the idea of atomistic man. For them, they look at man only participates within a society because they believe in what model of society? Market model of society, where every individual is nothing but looking is for his own self-interest. They don't believe in anything called as collective good. Then you can bring the argument of Marxist perspective in your answer, because Karl Marx disagrees with the argument that one who lives outside the state is God or beast, because for him state represents nothing but a class identity, and he calls state as what? State is an instrument of exploitation. But nevertheless, you can write in your conclusion saying that, but one has to give credit to Aristotle. Why? Because Aristotelian influence can be also seen in later thinkers such as Hegel, who considered state to be the march of God on earth. Understand? So here you are not just explaining the Aristotle view of state. First you have to be more specific. You have to explain in your answer, why does he say that state is a creation of nature? Why does he say man by nature is a political name? What does he mean by that, man by nature? That you need to explain in your answer. And since it's a 10 marker question, I give you just a broad explanation. Okay, but you have to be able to summarize it within short. Got it? Understood? So this is nothing but connected to Aristotle's view on state. So whenever you see questions like this, don't randomly start writing whatever you know. Try to be more specific, saying that when he says state is a creation of nature, tell how. Okay. So what many people do in the mains exam mistake is that they forget to write they only write about the what component. They forget to write about why component, how component. Means when you're explaining an answer, there will be something like why, there is something like how, that they will forget, and only they will just write what. Many times you won't get marks. See, this is what is Aristotle told. What is Aristotle told? State is a creation of nature. Man by nature is a political animal. It is what? But you have to tell now. Why? How? That you need to include in your answer. If you have not written in your answer, you are just repeating the same thing. Okay. And then you can go and counter argue it. Okay, what he's telling, is it correct? What are the repercussions of it? Got it? Now, try to write the answer for this question because it's an easy question. Write this for 10 marks and 150 words. I'll give you 7 minutes. So take down the question as attempt a critique of Aristotle's idea of slavery. Attempt a critique of Aristotle's idea of slavery. 10 marks, 150 words. You will get 7 minutes to write your answer. You have 7 minutes to write your answer. You have last 5 minutes. Last 4 minutes. Last 3 minutes. Last 2 minutes. Last 60 seconds. Last 10 seconds. Done. So now, how many of you are able to complete the answer? See, now this is what you can say is the exam pressure. You will have to make the habit of writing answers within given time. Now, why you have to learn to do this is that, plain and simple, if you are not able to do here, you are not able to go into do in the exam. Point. So in exam, what happens is that whatever quality answer you write, the quality deteriorates when you write in an examination hall. Why? Because now the previous questions all we did was without a time limit, right? Thinking broadly, thinking what you can. But actually, now what you did, you was writing within the given time limit. So when your accuracy will increase more is that the more brainstorming you have done and the more writing practice you have done, that will make you write within that given time. Means your mind will work. Means it will write, it will handle pressure. Now you can say like this year's prelims paper. Prelims paper was different. It was not like it is. I'm not telling it is not doable at all. Only those who are able to handle pressure, think under pressure, and yeah, getting 100 is not required. Even if you get 80, that is sufficient because you'll still clear. But again, it is what? Exam pressure. So again, you can say in most of the exams, your ability to handle pressure matters a lot. Why? Because what you write within that given 7 minutes, etc. I'm not expecting you to write the best answer, but a relevant practical answer. So what was the question? Quickly you should have realized. They're asking what? They're telling attempt. Attempt what? Critic of what? Aristotle's idea of slavery. It is a 10 marker question, 150 words. So I can't sit and hellbent on explain Aristotle's idea of slavery in detail. So my introduction will be very brief, that Aristotle, who is considered as father of political science, in his book Politics, he had defended slavery. Quickly I'll write a short paragraph on what grounds he had defended. He told slavery is natural, slavery is beneficial, and slavery also is good for the Greek economy. That's it. Now I'm going to bring about my answer about, I'm going to attempt a critique. When I write critique, I will bring the arguments that goes against slavery. One, I'll write about Immanuel Kant. When Immanuel Kant argues that you cannot defend anything just in the name of it is beneficial. So you can say slavery violates human dignity. Second one, I am going to bring the argument of Gandhi. When Gandhi says that dignity of labor, because Aristotelian defense of slavery, he always given superior position to those work which is based on reason rather than physical work. But you can say Gandhi spoke about dignity of labor. All labor should be given equal respect. Third, I'll bring Rousseau's argument saying that what? Aristotle's defense of slavery as natural is not acceptable. Why? Because all inequalities in societies are not natural. Because Aristotle, an argument that some are born to be rulers, some are born to be slaves, is invalid. Then I can also bring in my argument, what you can say, criticizing Aristotle idea of slavery, because the idea of his defense of slavery is going against the modern principles of equality, liberty, and social justice. So hence I would write in my answer that Aristotle means conclusional, right? Aristotle gave this idea ages ago, okay. But the irony of our times is that these arguments are still used in the present day society to justify the existing inegalitarian social order. Means you had more space, you can write like how they defended slavery in America, how caste system was defended in India. So their same defense is based on the Aristotelian argument that what it is natural and it is beneficial. Understand? So especially in political science papers, essay papers, etc., what you will have to do is that you will have to make your conclusion bit more impactful. Okay, because these are all value oriented subjects. So what kind of values you try to say in your conclusion? You have to bring your own values in that regard. So the examiner should feel, okay, this fellow is really writing well. So that's what I will write in my answer, saying that what Aristotle was told was ages back. But the irony of our times is that the same arguments are also used even today by certain sections of society to justify the existing inegalitarian social order. Got it? That's one advantage of reading newspapers. If you have read newspaper, if you have read editorial pages, you have this habit of picking up certain quotes, ending conclusions, and this will also help you where not only in political science, in ethics as well as in essay, because political science part A, ethics, essay, they're all similar. Why similar? These are all based on what? Philosophy. It is all based on what? Values. Got it? Understood how to end your answer. So that's what I told. Here also, it's a straightforward question. Most other people will write it, but still you can make your answer bit different if you are able to bring certain perspective. You understand? That's what I told. When people will not score, let us say all 3,000 people or 2,000 people writing the same content, same points, same perspective, why will they give you marks? You're not going to score very high, you're not going to score a 280 or 290, you will be in averages. You understand? What you're making different is not something new, you're just bringing from a new perspective. You can link Gandhi. See, this is social science paper, there's nothing wrong. Nobody can know, how can you know? I can link Gandhi. I will bring Gandhi's argument because Gandhi spoke about dignity of labor. You understand? That is the beauty of a social science paper, because you can link everything, but you should have that capacity to link it. Got it? Understood how to address this question. So the last question on Aristotle, what we'll take up? Okay. So take up this question and let us see how you'll write this question. Rule of law is better than rule of men. Aristotle. Rule of law is better than rule of men. Rule of men. Aristotle. Discuss. And you have to write for 15 marks. What will you write? Rule of law is better than rule of men. What will you write? Okay, he is the father of political science. In his work Politics, he speaks about. Again, he speaks about polity is the best practical form of government. In that, the rule of law is central to his political idea. Then what will you write? Correct one, you can say he made this statement in critique to philosopher King. Why? You have to explain that. Because Plato had told what? No law or ordinance is mightier than the knowledge of philosopher King. But for Aristotle, he disagreed with it. Now you need to explain what why Aristotle says rule of law is better than rule of men. Why? You are going to write here, main in your answer, the why component. Why? One, what Aristotle says, that collective wisdom is any day better than the wisdom of one person. Then, because Aristotle was conscious of the fact that power corrupts and absolute power can corrupt a person absolutely. And third, you can say that Aristotle strongly believed that no person should be above the law. Why? Because law will act as what? Restriction on arbitrary powers of the state or the individual or person. And you can say rule of law also ensures that what? What it also ensures? The application of the law does not vary according to the passion of the person who is exercising that power. You are understanding? So don't always think that you will have to only write what Aristotle told. They are asking you to discuss it. Discuss ka matlab, you also have to tell what is the significance of that statement. So in simple terms, you are writing about what is the importance of rule of law, what is rule of law, why we need rule of law, and why rule of law is placed above the rule of man. Okay, because Aristotle makes an argument statement. He says law is reason without passion, and hence then you'll write in your conclusion what, that is why Aristotle is considered one of the architects of the modern day constitutional democracies, and Aristotelian ideas have shaped way for evolution of rule of law, shaping of limited government, the idea of a constitutional state. Hence he is rightly considered as what? The father of political science. So where many people will not have words to write is that because they don't know what to, they'll only know, okay, he told rule of law is better than rule of men. How to explain that? You will have to write the why component. If you want, you can also give examples. If you want, you can also give examples in your answer. So for example, you can say in modern times we have seen what has happened when you can say it is rule of an individual. So for example, you can say rise of fascism in Germany, Italy, it led to what? So hence you can say rule of law is, according to Aristotle, was any day better than rule of one. You need to give your reasoning. That is what? Why component. Okay, and here I won't go write a counterpoint. That what the rule of people is better. No, not necessary for me to write that. Got it? Understood? In these kind of questions, how do you address it and how do you explain it? So you need to explain, you have to bring arguments in your answer explaining why rule of law is better than rule of men. So any other doubt you have in this Aristotle, what you can say? So see, if there is any questions on methodology of Aristotle and Plato, you can use these kind of statements. Okay, you can take on Professor Maxey, M-A-X-E-Y. Professor Maxey says that where Plato let his imagination take flight, where Plato let his imagination take flight, Aristotle is factual and arid. Aristotle is factual and arid. Factual and arid. One more person you can take his commentaries, Andrew Hacker. Where he says that Plato is a philosopher, whereas Aristotle is a scientist. Plato is a philosopher, whereas Aristotle is a scientist. Comma, Plato is a radical. Whereas Aristotle is a reformist. Aristotle is a reformist. This was a statement made by whom? Andrew Hacker. Andrew Hacker. There is one more statement of Aristotle, what Aristotle has made in his work Nicomachean Ethics, because this can be asked in ethics paper also. Okay, only a good man can become a good citizen. Only a good man can become a good citizen. And so this statement has been not asked in political science paper, but at a saying if they ask in ethics paper, they can ask this statement. Only a good man can become a good citizen's comment. Okay. So any other doubt you have in Aristotle? Any other question you feel that was difficult for you to answer? Okay, if there is no doubt, let's move on to the next thinker, that is Machiavelli. What are the basic content I need to know regarding Machiavelli? What is the works written by Machiavelli? It is The Prince and what? The Discourses on Livy. These are the important works written by Machiavelli. Machiavelli is also called as what? The child of Renaissance. And which school of thought Machiavelli belongs to? He belongs to realism. Machiavelli is also considered or called as the Galileo of politics. Okay, and if you look into important ideas given by Machiavelli, that what we can summarize. One, his view on human nature. So how did he describe humans as? Describe humans as what? Selfish, egoistic, avaricious, fickle-minded. Okay. Then you can say he also spoke about statecraft, or what you call as politics, in simple terms, power, politics. He also spoke about separation of ethics and politics. The other key word you need to remember is dual morality. Then you also have to know about, he also spoke about the qualities of the prince. Simple terms, one of the quote you can remember, he has to be lion and a fox. Or one more quote, what he says, rule not by love but by fear. And then you will have to know about his views on religion and politics. When you know about his religion and politics, you have to be aware of the fact that he rejected the two swords doctrine, which was prevalent in medieval times. What is two swords doctrine? That they said that there were two authorities, one was the Pope, the other was the king, but he rejected it. He told there should be only one sovereign, that is what? The prince or the king. And he also gave a utilitarian perspective. Utilitarian perspective of religion means state or the king can make use of religion for the benefits of what? The state. And he also has laid down the foundations of secularism, that is what? Separation of the state and church. And largely you can also have to know about the critics of Machiavelli, means those who have criticized Machiavelli. He is called as the teacher of evil by whom? Leo Ross. He calls Machiavelli as what? The teacher of evil, you have Sabine, who says that what Machiavelli is narrowly dated and narrowly located. You can also bring the arguments of Gandhi, where you can say, because Machiavelli stressed more that you can use any means to achieve your ends, where Gandhi was more conscious of ends. These are all content, whatever you can think of Machiavelli. Why I am telling is that, see now, because he says now completely separate morality and politics. There is no ground. Whatever the prince does is considered to be. If you have generally see Leo Strauss comes under which perspective? Traditional perspective. He is a normative scholar. Normative means one who emphasizes on role of values. Because Leo Strauss says, no. Leo Strauss has also criticized behavioral revolution. Leo Strauss says that behavioralists has reduced the subject to state of natural science, and that is why the subject has lost its ability to differentiate between clean water and dirty water. So Leo Strauss, why he criticizes? Because Machiavelli, he completely separates values from politics. He says that whatever you do in the name of politics is correct. That is why Leo Strauss criticizes him as what? Teacher of the evil. See now, this is one area where you have to be strong. In that sense, by chance, let us say you don't know also. Interpretation should be correct. Simple terms. Why do you think any person would have called Machiavelli as evil? Because of what he has recommended. But same way, many people support him also, saying that what you cannot judge Machiavelli on the yardstick of morality, because what Machiavelli is telling, it is not whether it is moral or it is immoral, it is amoral. So he says that politics should not be judged on yardstick of values. And that is why some also call Machiavelli as what? Forerunner of behavioralism. Understood? Means you have to be able to link Machiavelli to behavioralism. So now let's look at the questions what has come on Machiavelli. Then we'll know how to approach it, what content, where we can use it. So again, if you see what happens in an exam, it's all about writing skill. It's not about how much you have read. So you can see there are people who have read for Machiavelli almost 50-60 pages. Useless. Why? Because how many words you can write an answer? 150 words or 200 words. And in most of the answers, you just need to have an idea to write about it more effectively. So let us look at a question of Machiavelli. This was asked in 2020. So write down, comment on Machiavelli's secularism. Comment on Machiavelli's secularism. This is for 10 marks and you have to write in 150 words. So tell me, how will you approach? Same way, you can say in 2018, in the same theme, they have asked critically examine Machiavelli's view on Machiavelli's view on religion and politics. This was asked for 15 marks. And yeah, so these are the largely themes that has been asked on religion and politics. So one they asked comment on Machiavelli's secularism, other they asked Machiavelli's view on religion and politics, discuss. So tell me, how will you approach the first question? Comment on Machiavelli's secularism. What will you start your answer with? What will be your introduction? Don't like that, right? Machiavelli is considered by many as one of the first modern thinkers, because traditionally whom we consider as the first modern thinker? Thomas Hobbes, okay, because he explicitly wrote on sovereignty. But many consider what? Machiavelli is considered to be one of the earliest or the first modern thinker. Then you take on Machiavelli was one of the earliest scholars who belonged to the transitional period. Who belonged to the transitional period. So what we are referring here, transitional period? Shift from medieval period to modern age. Transitional period, who separated separated what? Separated the church from the state. Church from the state. And Machiavelli rejected the two swords doctrine. Two swords doctrine. Then you can write Machiavelli separated the church from the state because church during his period, time period in Italy, was highly corrupt, and it had intervened in the affairs of the state. It had intervened in the affairs of the state. Creating limitations on authority. Limitations on authority. So hence Machiavelli advocated for separation of the state and church. And laying down the foundations of European secularism. Then you take on next paragraph. But at the same time, Machiavelli also advocated a utilitarian perspective on religion, where the king can use it as a tool. To control the people. Understanding? So, for example, let us say when you are preparing, preparation stage, you will have to know how, because what he says that people are God fearing, etc. People will be afraid of God. So that is why he says that the state can make use of religion to control the people at large. So he has also brought a utilitarian perspective of what? Religion. Then you can say next paragraph. Take on. But however, when we look at countries like India, they do not follow the Machiavellian secularism. They follow the Gandhian philosophy of Sarva Dharma Samabhava. And there is no clear separation of state and religion. There is no clear-cut separation of state and religion. because Gandhi believed politics without religion is like a death trap. Because Gandhi believed politics without religion is like a death trap. Is like a death trap. Understood. This is how I would have written my answer if they had asked the question on comment on Machiavelli's secularism. So I would have explained what is Machiavelli's secularism. Then I would have also written my viewpoint. This is not a model that is followed everywhere. So countries like India where they follow a different model of secularism. And there I would have linked Gandhi's view, because Gandhi says completely separating religion and politics is like a death trap. Because Gandhi's view is that religion has moralizing tendency on politics. Understood how to approach this question. The same way if they had asked the question, critically examine Machiavelli's view on religion and politics, what will you write there? Because you can't write the same answer what you wrote here to this question. You will have to remodify your answer. What will you write here? In simple here, first you introduce about Machiavelli, then you first write about Machiavelli's view on religion. What is his view on religion? Whatever you wrote here, you can write. He completely advocates what? Separation of religion and politics. He rejects what? Two spots doctrine. And he also brings a utilitarian perspective of religion. Why does he bring a utilitarian perspective of religion? Because he says religion is a very important tool the king or a prince can use to control the people, because people are all God fearing. Okay, so and he also has laid down the foundation of secularism as a principle. Then you have to write about his politics. What do you write about his politics? What is Machiavelli's view on politics? He largely saw politics is nothing but struggle for power. Then he largely advocated that politics should be completely separated from the field of ethics or morality. Politics largely, the ruler should rule with what? With an iron hand. That is what, it is better to be ruled by fear than to be loved. And you can say the prince should have the characteristics of what? Lion and a fox. And for Machiavelli, politics is all about what? Retention of power, acquisition of power and retention of power. Now I will have to critically examine. Now I will bring critics. What is the critics? As I told, Gandhian critic, saying that when you look at countries like India, here there is no clear-cut separation of religion and politics. Why? Because Gandhi believes that it is like a death trap. Second, Machiavelli has been also criticized by people like Leo Strauss as what? Teacher of the evil in that regard, because he is bringing a utilitarian perspective of religion. And in modern times, we have seen that if religion is used by the state, it can have disastrous consequences. Third, you can write about his nature of power. He is looking at politics very narrowly. Okay, that is why Sabine criticized him, narrowly dated, narrowly located. The reason, because politics cannot be only seen as power acquisition and power retention. Politics also involves values. Politics also involves building a better society. And thirdly, you can also say that his way of describing the qualities of the prince is also very narrow. He is saying that he should be lion and a fox. But you can say people like T.H. Green have always shown that what? It is not will, not force is the basis of state or basis of building political obligation. Nevertheless, in spite of these limitations, one cannot deny Machiavelli's place in Western political thought as one of the earliest scholars to bring about what? A realistic understanding of politics. And hence it is popularly said that one might criticize Machiavelli, but there is a Machiavellian in everybody. Got it? So something like that you can write as your answer. So here, when I critically examine first half of my answer, I just wrote about what Machiavelli's view was there on politics and religion. But second half of my answer, I brought my analysis of it. You understand? There are many other points you can write if you want, but that again depends upon the context. So, for example, Machiavelli says about what? King should be a fox and a lion. But if you take Buddhist philosophy, they say king should be what? Compassionate. King should be what? Fatherly figure. You understand? You have to be able to interlink. Getting your mind? So question can go this way also. Okay, imagine a question they'll ask. Take down this question and let us say you will write. Write down this question. I'll give you time to write. Compare and contrast. Compare and contrast The Machiavellian prince with Plato's philosopher king. Compare and contrast Machiavellian prince with Plato's philosopher king. 15 marks. 15 marks. You have to write the answer within 12 minutes. Your time starts now. Last 6 minutes. Last 5 minutes. Last 4 minutes. Last 1 minute. Done. So obviously here the question was what? You have to compare and contrast what? Plato's philosopher king and Machiavelli's prince, right? So obviously what will be your introduction? So introduction you can write something saying that Plato and Machiavelli are two pillars of the Western political thought. One represents the school of political philosophy, the other represents the school of political realism. Okay. Then you can say that, give us a bedding and say that what are the differences between Machiavelli's prince and Plato's philosopher king. So one you can say that difference is that Plato's philosopher king is premised on what? The world of ideas. Whereas if you take Machiavelli's prince, is premised on what? Power, politics. Second point of difference what you can write is that Plato's philosopher king, the most dominant quality in him, what? Reason. But when you take Machiavelli's prince, what he says about his prince, he should have qualities of both lion as well as a fox. Third point of difference you can say is that for Machiavelli's prince, he is not bound by any kind of moral standards. He is free to pursue what? The interest of the state, or what you call as national interest. Whereas in terms of Plato, he does not separate what you can say politics and ethics. So it's a key aspect of the quality of what you can say the philosopher. Fourth, you can say that Plato or Plato's philosopher king is prohibited from having what? Family as well as private property. Is what? Communism of wives and property. But you can look at, whereas Machiavelli's prince, there is no such restrictions. He is allowed to pursue what? His family, and he can also have private possession of property at large. Fifth, you can say Plato's philosopher king is chosen what? A rigorous education system, whereas Machiavelli's prince is a byproduct of what? Monarchical succession in that regard. So then you can go on to say that what? In spite of all these differences in that regard, nevertheless, both Plato and Machiavelli had a common interest. That is what? They wanted to build an ideal state or a perfect state. Both were concerned about their motherland. And both wanted to build, like in terms of Plato, a strong city state of Athens. Same way, Machiavelli also wanted to bring unification of Italy and emerge of a powerful ruler. This is what you can write in your answer when they ask you to compare and contrast Plato and Machiavelli in terms of what? Philosopher, king and prince. Or you can also add in conclusion. Yeah, that you can say in both. You can say they're above the law. So then you can add your conclusion if you want. Lusky, as Lusky says, that every political thinker is a child of their time. So was Plato and Machiavelli. See, no, again the point is that in exam, your ability to write within the given time. Understand? So what many people will think is that we have not read. Once we read, we'll be able to write. No. Even after you read, you are not able to write. Why? Because you have not practiced. This is what we can say. You have to consistently do writing practice. You have to consistently doing thinking practice. So many people, they think like that. They think that what, okay, once we read, later we'll write. You know, our abilities will develop to write. No, reading is only different. Thinking is only different. Writing is only different. So you can only write what you have thought. You can't write what you have not thought. Understand? So under exam pressure, you have to be able to at least write 60% of what you have discussed in your. So these are the other areas of questions what can come. I'm not telling it has come. The possibility will come, because one question already they've asked is that draw parallels. Draw parallels. Draw parallels. Parallels between Artha Shastra tradition. Artha Shastra tradition and the realist tradition. Realist tradition represented by Machiavelli. Presented by Machiavelli. This was asked in 2012 for 20 marks. Then again you can say in 2015 they've asked similar question. Compare and contrast views of Kautilya and Machiavelli. Compare and contrast views of Kautilya and Machiavelli. This they've asked for 15 marks in 2015. So it is similar themed question. So obviously it is nothing but comparison between Arthashastra and Machiavelli's prince, or comparison between Kautilya and Machiavelli. What you can write in introduction in these kind of questions? What can be our introduction? Simply instead of that, write Pinder Singh. In our book Violence in Ancient India. Calls Machiavelli as the Italian Kautilya. Okay, or you can also say Nehru in his book Discovery of India calls Machiavelli as what? Calls Kautilya as what? The Indian Machiavelli. So then you can say that Kautilya and Machiavelli belong to the realist tradition of international politics or in political science. Then you can say though they are separated in a time period, but yet their ideas are very much similar to a certain extent. Now you'll have to write which of these ideas are similar. Okay, so which ideas are similar? Both believed in what? That politics is about accumulation, and retention of power. Second, both of them believed in what? Politics and ethics needs to be separated, or you can say political decision should be not measured on ethical yardsticks. Third, what is the similarity? Both advocated for to rule by fear than to be loved. Fourth, what is the fourth similarity between Machiavelli and Cautilya? So both believed that material welfare of people is very essential to ensure what you can say stability of the kingdom or the ruler. Fifth is what? Fifth similarity is what you can see in both of them. Yeah, but apart from that, any other key ideas? What you find similar between Cautilian tradition and Machiavellian tradition? Both stress on ends are more important than what you call as means. Both also stressed on the importance of hard power to ensure the security of the what you can say security of the state. So these are certain similarities that you can draw between Kautilya and Machiavelli. However, what? However, at a closer look, you can say there are also differences in the Kautilya's Arthashastra tradition and Machiavelli's Prince. What are the differences? One, you can say in Machiavelli's Prince, the prince is above the what? Ethical yardstick. Whereas in Kautilya, what Kautilya says, even the king or the Rajan is bound by what? Morality or ethics. It can't be completely separated. Second point of difference, you can say that Kautilya's Arthashastra not only stresses on statecraft, it also goes into in description about political economy as well as public administration, whereas Machiavelli's Prince is more of a statecraft. It does not dwell too much into political economy or statecraft. Third, you can say Machiavelli completely separates religion from politics, whereas Cautilian Prince, you can say there is no clear-cut separation of religion from politics, and many consider what the ancient India the rule was it was a what you can say coalition between the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas. And what is the fourth difference you can find between Kautilya and Machiavelli? Even here also he has spoken about. What else? What else you can think about? There's a point of difference between Machiavelli and Kautilya. In what ways? On what other parameters you can say they are more different? So, if you look at this Machiavelli, he largely speaks about what one of the duty of the king is only to ensure national interest. But if you go into Kautilya's king, he also has something called as Raja Dharma. And in Raja Dharma, one of the aspects is that he has to maintain the Varna Dharma. That is what? Functional specialization in the society, which is not seen in Machiavelli. Machiavelli only speaks about maintenance of the state, but this will also goes into saying about maintenance of the society at large. But then you can write in your conclusion saying that Max Weber in his in what? Politics, I think as vocation or something, right? Or vocation of politics or what? Politics as a vocation. He says that when one compares Machiavelli and Kautilya, Kautilian king appears to be more evil and Machiavellian than Machiavelli. Something like that you can write as your conclusion. So what Max Weber says in his politics as vocation, says one compares Kautilya and Machiavelli. Kautilian king appears to be more evil and Machiavellian than Machiavelli. So this is something you could have written as your conclusion. And so this is a repeated theme question, means consistently, means many even old question paper, if you go even more 1990s also this question has come. Compare and contrast Machiavelli and Kautilya. Got it? So that's why I told, so many questions if you have solved beforehand or if you have developed themes, introduction, conclusion, it becomes much easier in the exam. In GS paper it is difficult to do. Why it is difficult to do? Because the repeated themes won't come. But in an optional paper it is easy to replicate. Why? Because most of the things, you can say 60% of the optional questions that comes are repeated themes. Okay, only when you can say how they can make it different, when they start asking new themes. But even now, even last year if you take paper, I think political science paper 1 was easy only. Why? Because repeated themes only they had asked. Okay, it is only in political science paper 2 what he had done, bit of current issues, current affairs. So if you know current issues you can write easily there also. But yeah, but paper 1 was repeated themes, only is asking in what? New formats, same theme but in new words, same theme in new structures. Now one more question about Machiavelli, which is can be important, how you can look at. Take down the question. Explain how Machiavelli's application. Explain how Machiavelli's application. How Machiavelli's application of empirical method. Machiavelli's application of empirical method to human affairs. To human affairs. To human affairs. Human affairs marks an important stage. Marks an important stage. Marks an important stage in the evolution of political science. In the evolution of political science. Evolution of political science. 20 marks, 250 words. Easy question only, but you will have to know how to structure it and how to apply. What are the keywords in the question? One keyword is what? Explain. The other keyword is what? Machiavelli's application of what? Empirical method to what? Human affairs. Another keyword is what? Marks an important stage in the evolution of what? Political science. Okay, so what is the question about? largely the question is about evolution of political science, how political science has evolved. So obviously they are telling in this evolution Machiavelli represents an important stage. Why? That you need to answer. So obviously, so what you are going to start your answer with? You can say the evolution of political science goes back to the what you can say, the Greek time period, when you can say, I think there's this scholar called as Professor Moyer. Yeah. Professor Moyer, who says that the roots of Western political thought can be traced back to the calmness of the Greek mind. Okay, what does Professor Moyer says? The roots of Western political thought or European political thought can be traced back calmness of the Greek mind. Greek mind. So then what will you write? Then what will you write? So what was the nature of the subject during Greek period? Largely, so you have to largely in political science during Greek period, it was normative in approach. However, Machiavelli was one of the first thinker who tried to separate values and politics. He studied human nature because he was also called as what, child of Renaissance. So he belonged to a time period where there was a lot of development with respect to what, science and reason, and hence Machiavelli, what he did, he applied scientific methods. What is scientific methods? His view about human nature was not based on metaphysical aspect, it was based on the conditions during in Italy in 16th century. Based on that, what did he tell? Humans are selfish, fickle-minded, egoistic, materialistic, avaricious. And then you can also say that Machiavelli's understanding of politics was not based on what ought to be, it was based on what it is. Thirdly, you can also say Machiavelli also separated what, religion and politics. Machiavelli completely gave a new direction to politics. He told politics should be understood and studied as what, power accumulation, power retention, and hence you can say that yeah, he completely separated politics and ethics. And Machiavelli is also considered as one of the forerunners of behavioralism. Why? Because it is based on Machiavellian ideas. Later scholars such as what, Hobbes, John Locke, etc., they also developed their methodology. And ultimately by 1940s and 1950s, this led to a new movement in political science called as behavioral revolution, which largely emphasized on Machiavellian methods of what, separating the role of values from the field of political science, developing newer techniques to understand politics. Hence you can say that Machiavelli represents an important phase in the development of political science. He marks, means there is a, I think there's a quote of Machiavelli, you can write that quote. You can write this quote. Okay, Ernst Cassirer, Ernst Cassirer, in his work Myth of State, Ernst Cassirer, in his work The of State, Myth of State, calls Machiavelli as the Galileo of politics, calls Machiavelli as Galileo of politics, Galileo of politics, for distinguishing, Galileo of politics, for distinguishing facts of political life, facts of political life and the values of moral judgment, facts of political fight, and values of moral judgment. Okay, one more statement what you can use in this question also earlier when you start with Greek political thought and how Machiavelli changed it. You can write Leo Strauss in his book or in his work Thoughts on Machiavelli. Leo Strauss in his work, that is Thoughts on Machiavelli. Thoughts on Machiavelli. Says that Machiavelli differs from Socratic tradition. Machiavelli differs from Socratic tradition. Machiavelli differs from Socratic tradition such that he differs from Socratic tradition such that he believes in materialism. He believes in materialism and rejects the view. Believes in materialism and rejects the view that philosophy is higher than politics. Rejects the view that philosophy is higher than politics. Higher than philosophy and politics. The same way, you have one more person called as Joshua Kaplan, who says that Joshua Kaplan, who says that Machiavelli emancipated politics. Machiavelli emancipated politics from theology and moral philosophy. From theology and moral philosophy. Okay, so all these statements are more similar, means he is separating politics and ethics or etc. But you can use them in your answer based on need of it. You don't need to write everything in one answer. You can use it accordingly when you look at a question or as an introduction or somewhere in the answer at large. But again, I don't know, quotes and all taking down is easy, but using them is difficult. Why? You should have practiced them some at least 10 times. You should have written some 10 different answers. In that you should have used them. So once you have used them, what will happen? Naturally, you will pick it up. See, some people, what will happen with notes collection, right? As I told, they are only becoming what? Content collectors. They are not going to become district collectors. Why? Simply you keep dumping content without any idea knowing where you are going to use that content, why will you use that content. Understand? So any content you have to use it, you should internalize it. Internalize it means it should be consciously available with you. Otherwise it is there in your notes. Once you go and attend the exam and come back, again it will be only in your notes. It will be not in your exam paper. Why? Because you are not conscious of the fact where to use it, how to use it, when to use it. So anything you read, you should have known it, utility. Where will I use it? When will I use it? In which context shall I use it? Is it right to use it in this particular question or not? So that if you had practiced multiple times, then when you write an exam, automatically your brain will work. That is what we call as internalization. So examples and all, you have to be able to internalize. Okay. So especially when you go to paper 2, it's more about you have to give examples. You can't just write. Everybody knows theory. Okay, if you take role of MNC, simple na. There is a realist perspective, there is a Marxist perspective, there is a liberal perspective. What is a realist perspective? MNCs are nothing but extension of the arm of the state. What is a liberal perspective? Yes, their institutional development, they'll bring growth, they'll contribute to peace, etc. What is the Marxist perspective? There is nothing but instrument of exploitation. Immanuel Wallerstein. Now, only if you write that much, they won't give you marks. You have to back it by examples from each perspective. So I think recently, if you see, there is an, I think in yesterday in Telegram channel I had posted about SpaceX. There is an article given in Foreign Affairs or I think Project Syndicate where that compared SpaceX to what? East Indian company. So SpaceX, again it brings a perspective of what you can say largely the Marxist perspective or the realist perspective on SpaceX, because there is one similarity between realism and Marxism. Both don't consider the importance or significance of multinational companies. Both see them as what? Instruments. Okay, Marxists will largely see them as instrument of capitalists. Realists will largely see them as instruments of whom? State. That is common in both of them. So obviously that the article represents that perspective. So they told what SpaceX today has become an invisible empire, and how they had given examples that how SpaceX exercises power. So for example, one of the things, it is valued currently around 1.75 trillion, which is more than GDP of many African countries. And second, you can say SpaceX dominates certain areas. For example, space. 94% of rocket launches in America has been completely monopolized by SpaceX. And not only that, SpaceX can dictate terms to the state. That is what Lusky had long back told, that what if the state does not control the capitalist will control the state. And that is what Elon Musk has done. For example, in 2022, when Ukraine wanted to bomb Russia, they asked for help from Starlink. America was in support of it, Europe was in support of it, but only one person was not in support of it, that was Elon Musk. He denied it. Or secondly, you can say that when there was a public feud between Trump and Musk, he threatened to cut off any kind of access to international space station, and that is the power that is exercised by SpaceX. So you have to be able to bring those answers, examples. You understand that entire article is not important, but you are conscious of your fact to know that okay, tomorrow when I am going to write about a multinational company, I am going to mention in my answer SpaceX. Don't again write about Walmart. Walmart is an old example which people used to write 10 years back. Bear in mind. So some people, what they would have read old notes, right? Market material. Okay, you would have read 5 years back notes. Same notes you keep adding in your answer, you won't get marks. Why? Because if you are able to write, even your next person is able to write the same thing. Walmart will write. You can make out clearly. You can make out from some answers only. All they are quoting nothing from a notes. Globalization, simple. They'll write same thing. Globalist, anti-globalist, transformist. Yeah, that's true. That's a perspective. But you have to give examples for it. That is where the competition lies, and that is where you will have to bring certain value addition in your answer to make your answer seem bit different. Correct. So that's what I told you. Now Joshua Kaplan, what you read, Hans Cassirer, what you read. You should know when to use it, where to use it. You have to know the application part. Now another question you can take down on Machiavelli, which can say it's more of a critique of Machiavelli. What we can look at. So take down, discuss the importance of Machiavelli in the history of political thought. Discuss the importance of Machiavelli in the history of political thought. The history of political thought. Is it correct to say? Is it correct to say? Right to say that Machiavelli's theory, is narrowly located, is narrowly local and narrowly dated. So this they asked for 20 marks. So there are two parts in the question, right? So what is first part they're asking? The keyword is what? You have to discuss. Discuss what? Importance of what? Machiavelli. Where? In history of political thought. This is the first part of the question what I have to answer. Second part, they're asking my opinion, saying that whether what Machiavelli's theories are there, are they narrowly dated or narrowly located? So this is the second part in my question. So how will I start my question? So obviously I have to start with this. What will I say? Correct. We can say that Machiavelli is considered as the first really scholar in the history of Western political thought. Machiavelli is considered as what? The first really scholar in the history of Western political thought. Then what can you write? His work, Politics, stands as a starting point of understanding statecraft. His work, Politics, starts as a starting point of understanding what? The art of statecraft. Then what will you write? What is his significance? Think about what is his significance. Tell me one of two important significance of Machiavelli. Simple. You Joshua Copland said, no, Joshua Copland says what? Machiavelli was a thinker who, what is that? What is the statement you took down? Who freed politics from theology and what is that? Moral philosophy. Then you can write about he's laid down the foundations of what? The European secularism. It is through his ideas, you can say, birth of secularism, the rejection of two spots doctrine. Third, his methodology. What kind of methodology he brought? He brought scientific methods of understanding politics. Hence, some also consider him to be as what? Forerunners of behavioral revolution in the field of political science. And according to some scholars, he is also considered to be the first modern thinker. Why? Because his ideas reflects modern elements of understanding politics. Hence, you can say Ernst Cassirer in his work, The Myth of the State, calls Machiavelli as what? The Galileo of politics. The other significance of Machiavelli is that Machiavellian ideas have also led to the rise of the realism as a school of thought in international politics to understand international relations. Hence, you can say that Machiavelli marks that same question is there now. What is it? Machiavelli, what was that? Machiavelli's application of empirical method to human affairs marks an important stage in the evolution of political science. The previous question, what is it? That only you can add in this point. Now I have to come to the second part of my question. What is the second part of my question? They are asking, is it correct to say that Machiavelli is narrowly local and narrowly dated? Now, what will I write here? What will be my approach? So obviously, this is a viewpoint represented by somebody, that is Sabine. First, I'll explain why there is such a viewpoint. Because Sabine considered that many of Machiavellian ideas was only relevant to that time period. For example, his view of human nature was just a reflection of the conditions in Italy. Or his idea of separating religion and politics was limited to what? The church being highly corrupt. And many of his ideas was a reflection of the Renaissance period, what was happening at that point. But it will be completely wrong to agree that all his ideas are narrowly located and dated. Some of his ideas are relevant even in contemporary times. Now I just need to give examples at how it is relevant. So some of his ideas was not only to his time period, it has been existent even before that. For example, Kautilya in his Arthashastra has reflected similar ideas. Second, we can say that Machiavellian ideas have given room or development of what? Behavioral revolution in the field of political science. And today, if you look at in many Western countries of the world, they follow what? The European secularism, that is separation of the state and church. And fourth one, when you look at the present world order, when we are looking at the current world order, we can say that it reflects Machiavellian world order, where you can say all politics is all about what? Power accumulation. So hence you can say that Machiavellian ideas are relevant even in present times, and that is why you can say that Machiavelli is one of the most important scholars in the Western political thought. So understood. In second part of the answer, I'll bring more of my arguments, saying that writing and counter to what? Sabine, because Sabine is saying it is narrowly dated and located. I don't completely agree with it. So also writing in what ways his ideas are also applicable even today or different time periods. Got it? You're understanding. So what is happening with UPSC is that UPSC is going more towards applied questions. Okay, they've reduced the number of questions used to come like before. Like write on Machiavelli's view on religion, write on Machiavelli's view on politics. These kind of questions are not coming. They are intermixing. Intermixing what? Mix Machiavelli with behavioralism. Mix Machiavelli with Kautilya. Get a point? So if you are looking what they're making more the topics interlinked, means a candidate's ability to write an interlinked question. When you are able to write that very effectively, when your knowledge base is very good and where your application skills are well developed, that time you will be able to write. But when you will be shocked is that suddenly when they ask a question which is more applied, you don't know how to write. Why? Because you don't feel it is there in your notes. Got it? So this is one trend you need to understand about Western Buddhism. But Plato, Aristotle, Machiavelli, as we see, the percentage of questions has drastically declined. Okay, so for example, in I think till 2013 to 2024, if you look at the number of questions that come from Western political, that was almost high as 25%, but that has drastically declined to 15%. Means the percentage of question they're asking is less. Or one more thing, what they're doing, even if they're asking, they're trying to interlink, like how Aristotle to modern day constitutionalism, Machiavelli to behavioralism. Got it? Plato's justice and Rawls' justice. So they are making it more interlinked, concept based. You have to apply and write. Now, same way, the next two important scholars are whom? Because we can read them in a comparative way. One is Hobbes. The other one is what? John Locke. So what are the okay? What is the work written by Hobbes? Leviathan. What is the work written by Locke? Two treatise on government. And one more work is what? Essay on human understanding. And Hobbes witnessed which revolution? Puritan revolution. Locke had witnessed which revolution? Glorious revolution. And we call both Locke and Hobbes as what? Social contract theorist. And here you will have to know what? One, Hobbes is considered as the first modern thinker. Why we consider Hobbes as the first modern thinker? Because he explicitly told about sovereignty. He freed the sovereign from all kinds of limitation. That is why there is a saying that what? While Odin was standing at the gates of modernity, it was Hobbes who first entered it. So this is a context when you can link with what Hobbes is as a first modern thinker. But again, you have to know the explanation for it. Okay, that you have read, you will know that divine law, natural law, these were certain limitations what Odin had placed on the king or the state. But it was Hobbes who completely liberated from all kinds of restriction. And that is why he said that he is the first modern thinker. He explicitly wrote about sovereignty. And then you can say that you have to know Hobbes's view on human nature. You also have to then connect what is description of state of nature, what he described human nature as. Man is selfish, egoistic, and what? And materialistic. And this he says without state of nature is what? A state of nasty, brutish, and short. So it is a state of security dilemma. He also said humans are guided by two sovereign masters. What is that? Pleasure and pain. He also told mans were utilitarian. Humans were utilitarian, means maximize pleasure, minimize pain. And then he spoke about the social contract. What is the social contract? He says that once people have signed the contract, that will result in establishing the sovereign. The sovereign will have all the powers. Individuals will sacrifice their natural rights which they enjoyed instead of nature. Only one right that will be preserved for them is what? Right to life. That is the only area when he can revolt against the state. And that is why he says in state of nature, natural law, natural rights, even though they are there, they are useless. And he calls them as what? Covenant without words are nothing but what do you call as words. And then you will have to know regarding his contract is a single contract, and it is both free social as well as free political. Then you can also say that Hobbes completely liberated the sovereign from all kinds of limitation. What kinds of limitation? Divine law, natural law, etc. For him, only the law, that is what? Positive law. So he's a proponent of what? Positive law. So what do you mean by positive law? Law made by the state. And then you will also have to know regarding Hobbes's views on what? Law and liberty. So what does Hobbes say regarding law and liberty? He says liberty is where law is silent. Understood? But I have not gone into explanation to it. That will do when we are writing an answer, but you will have to know this statement. You have to also know meaning. What does he mean by that? Okay. So law, liberty is where law is silent, meaning an individual is allowed to express his freedom only where the state has not made the law. In all other scenario, you have to follow what the state says. Why you have to follow? Because one, you have signed the contract. Second one, if you don't follow, it will result in anarchy. You go back to living in state of nature. Okay, so that is one more thing you have to know, his relation between law and liberty. Same way, you will also have to know regarding Hobbes's views on individualism. What is individualism? Focusing on individual rights, protecting individual rights. So Hobbes starts as an individualist, but he ends as what? Absolutist. Okay, why absolutist? Because if you look at his contract and if you look at what kind of state he has created an absolute state. Leviathan means what? Sea monster. And that is why you can say the church and many people are highly critical of Hobbes. So Hobbes was also considered as what? Spiritual father of what? Fascism. Okay, he was called also what? Spiritual father of fascism. The church was highly critical of Hobbes' Leviathan, and I think it was Whitehead or somebody who criticized Hobbes' Leviathan, called as what? Toad, full of poison. But there are also people who have praised Hobbes and his work, and they say he's one of the greatest individualists. Got it? So these are all the things you can know about Hobbes. I'm telling at basic level what you can write. But yeah, inner content you will have to know. This is only I have told outer surface level what you can write, but inner content you will have to know the exact meaning. That will only find out writing answers. So let's look into certain questions on Hobbes. And Hobbes is one thinker, if you see, they've asked more number of questions, especially after 2020. Understand? Among Western political thought, if you take in last 5 years, which thinker has repeatedly come in the exam? It is Thomas Hobbes. See, for example, 2023 Hobbes question has come, 2022 Hobbes question has come, 2017 Hobbes question has come, 2016 Hobbes question has come, 2013 Hobbes question has come. So Hobbes is one thinker who has been repeatedly asked in the exam. So let us look at the question on Hobbes. You can take down. Comment on the state of nature as state of war. Thomas Hobbes. State of nature. State of nature as state of war. Comment. Okay. See, this is one question that has come. Similar, right? If you take in 2016, that asked a question similar, but that was asked in a different way. It's a very lengthy question. I'll just read out because it will take more space. So it's a statement what they picked from Hobbes. How would I and my fellow human beings behave if we were to find ourselves in the state of nature, and what does this behavior tell us about our innate predisposition? Thomas Hobbes. What is the statement saying that? How would I and my fellow human beings behave if we were to find ourselves in state of nature, and what does this behavior tell us about our innate predisposition. Thomas Hobbes. And they've asked you for discuss, but it is only for what? 10 marks, 150 words. So now tell me, what is the difference between this question and this question? The question is same. The answer is also same. It is not different, because here it is only, he has only made things complex. How would I and my fellow human beings behave ourselves we find in state of nature? He is asking about state of nature. So what is the state of nature? What is state of nature? Tell me Hobbes' description of state of nature. It is nasty, it is brutish, it is short. Why? Because man is individualistic, man is egoistic, man is driven by pleasure and pain, and every man is. See, why does Karl Marx call Hobbes is the father of all? No, Karl Marx calls Hobbes as father of all. Why? Because Hobbes was one of the earliest thinker, or the first thinker in Western political thought, to say that all humans are equals. All humans are equals. All humans have pleasure and pain. So Hobbes says that every human being is driven by two sovereign masters, means they control your mind. What controls your mind? Pleasure and pain. So obviously their intent is what? To maximize pleasure. And how does humans get pleasure? By acquiring material things. And this results in what? Fight. Why? Because resources are not unlimited. And that is why what state of nature results in? It results in security dilemma, war of one against all. Now what does that tell about our innate means inner predispositions? Nothing but about human nature. Humans are selfish. Here also what they asked. State of nature, a state of war. See, this was a paper I wrote in 2016. I had written this exam. After we came out of the examination hall, you had like me and my friends, we had done well. Why? Because we knew how to write. Others in our center, one fellow was saying, Maga, idu ellinda tagdir gota, Brian Nelson anta book ide. Brian Nelson, ನೀನು ಎಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಆದರೂ ತೆಗಿಲಿ, ನೀನಿಗೆ ಏನಕ್ಕೆ ಬೇಕು? commons, see simple common, maga in the bukkala illa maga, idu Brian Nelson. Now they started studying Brian Nelson. Those who don't have brains will study Brian Nelson. It's not required. Why you need that? Plain and simple. It's a sentence what they have picked. But again, it is communicating the same thing. They're asking, instead of directly asking, write about Hobbes' state of nature, he's given a statement and he's asking you now, write. So indirectly he's asking you what, write about state of nature. This is nothing out of context, out of books. Plain and simple application of what you have read. The same question you see here. Oh, where did it go? Yeah, the same question what you say there, that they had asked about what? Okay, they had asked about comment on state of nature, comment on human nature. Answer is remain same. So how you will start your answer? Saying that Hobbes is one of the finest English scholars ever, what you can say, seen in the Western political thought. His most important work is Leviathan. And then you just go on to say that Hobbes says that state of nature means a stage where common authority was not there. So what was state of nature? He says that it was nasty, it was brutish, it was short. Tell why it was nasty, brutish? Because according to Hobbes, every individual is driven by what? Two sovereign masters, pleasure and pain. Humans by nature what? Selfish, egoistic and materialistic. This results in what? Complete chaos, complete anarchy. And in order to come out of it, what Hobbes recommended, that they'll have to sign a social contract. Next what you write is your comments. So one, you can criticize Hobbes saying that human nature involves complex psychology. It is not simplifying, saying that all humans are selfish, egoistic or materialistic. Second thing you can say that what some have criticized these social contract theories in general is that this social contract is not true, it's just a fallacy. There is no evidence of any contract being ever signed. And third one, you can say Locke himself contradicts Hobbes because he also belonging to the same time period. He says that what humans by nature are decent, orderly, and state of nature is completely cooperative. But nevertheless, you can say Hobbes' views can be seen even today where in international politics, where international politics resembles, current international politics resembles Hobbesian state of nature. You are done with your answer because both questions have been asked for how many marks? 10 marks. You have to write in 150 words. So got the point. So don't feel confused just because they asked a new statement. Try to read that statement carefully and try to understand under what context they are asking. So where you have to be fast in exam is that fast in interpreting. You get one. Let us say they give a broad statement, you are not able to think suddenly. Write some questions, come back to the question later and look and write at it. Because if you try to write very hurriedly, let us say you didn't understand only, you will end up writing just whatever you know about Hobbes. But that question is not difficult, it is very easy. It's only telling indirectly about what? State of nature and human nature. So both questions are same. One more question about Hobbes you take down. Individualism is inherent. Individualism is inherent. Individualism is inherent in Hobbes. In Hobbes' absolutist ideology, individualism is inherent in Hobbes' absolutist ideology. Hobbes' absolutist ideology. So how will you address this question? What is first of all the demand of the question? What is the demand of the question? Simple. Means indirectly they are asking about Hobbes' individualism. Meaning the thing, even though Hobbes is considered as an absolutist, but you can say that he is one of the greatest individualists. So how will you structure your answer here? No, first you write about Hobbes is one of the, again same, finest English scholars who's written this work called as Leviathan, and where he was accused of being what? And for representing an absolute state, an authoritarian state. I think there is a quote when somebody says, I forgot the name of the quote. Who says that Hobbes started as an individualist, but he ended as an Macpherson? You can say Macpherson says that what Hobbes started as an individualist, but he ended as an absolutist. So you can say that when you write, when we look into Hobbes's ideas, even though at the surface level he seems to be an absolutist, but you can say that individualism is a key aspect of his political ideas. Now you go start writing. What are the points you said? That one is what? And he uses resolutive, composite method. He starts his analysis of state from what? Individual. Second one, you can say that in his social contract, he considers who's signing the contract. It is free willing individuals who are signing the contract. Third one, why they are signing the contract? By sake of security of what? Security of life, liberty and property. And even after signing the contract, what Hobbes argues that an individual continues to retain his right to life. He can revolt against the sovereign if the sovereign fails to protect his life. But Hobbes, in order to protect individual, went on to establish a sovereign, giving it absolute powers. Hence, he is criticized as what? The spiritual father of fascism. Is also his work Leviathan is also criticized what? Laying down the foundations of a totalitarian state. Hence, Macpherson says that Hobbes started as an individualist, but he ended as an absolutist. That is what you need to write in your answer. The question what they asked is simple. They have told individualism is inherent in Hobbes's absolutist ideology. Comment. So first you write about why Hobbes is considered as an absolute ideology. Then you write about how there is individualism within Hobbes' absolute ideas that you need to point out in your answer. So this was asked in 2022 for 15 marks. In 2017, they had asked this question, comment on Hobbes' notion of political obligation. Comment on Hobbes' notion of political obligation. This is for 10 marks, 150 words. How will you approach this question? Okay, first of all, what do you mean by political obligation? What is political obligation? Because if you see, in last few years, many questions have come on the concept called as political obligation. So you have to know what is the concept of political obligation. Simple, a theory that promotes why citizens have to obey the state. So they're asking you here, comment on Hobbes' notion of political obligation. Means what is Hobbes' perspective that why individual has to obey the state. Simple, na? What first you write out what is his perspective. So again, same Hobbes as one of the greatest thinker, or you read about some statements of Hobbes, try to add it in your introduction. Now let's come to the demand of the question. Tell me now, what is Hobbes' notion of political obligation? Simple. First you need to write about state of nature. What is state of nature? Same, nasty, brutal, short, etc. War of one against all. In state of nature, what happens? There is no security life, there is no security property. It is very short-lived. Why it is so? Why? Because humans by nature are what? Selfish, egoistic, materialistic. And in order to come out of this, the only option what individuals have is to sign a social contract. And by signing this contract, they are agreeing what? They are agreeing to surrender all their natural rights, what they enjoyed, and now follow what? Follow what? The command of the sovereign. Through this, what individual will enjoy? Stability, peace, protection to his life and property. Then you are going to counter it by saying that, however, this notion of political obligation has been critiqued, saying that he has taken away individual rights, he has made individuals subservient to the commands of the sovereign. Second one, you can say that what T.H. Green spoke about, that it is not force, will, not force, is the basis of state. And secondly, you can say state is not performing any kind of positive function, state is only performing security functions, and yet he is asking people to obey the state. Spite of these limitations, one can say that Thomas Hobbes laid down the foundations of the modern state, modern perspective of state, something else you can take. So if you had understood the word of what is political obligation, then you could have beautifully written an answer. But if you don't know what is political obligation exactly, then what you write, you will start spraying point all over whatever you know regarding Hobbes. Now why I'll tell you, because political obligation question can be asked in other way also. They are only asked comment on Hobbes' notion of political obligation. Let us say the question comes like this: discuss the evolution of the notion of political obligation from the ancient times to the contemporary time period. Okay, this was one of the questions which I had asked last time in our test series. So how will you write this answer? Of course, first you are going to tell what is political obligation. Political obligation is a theory which explains why people will have to obey the state. Now they are asking you to discuss the evolution of notion of political obligation from ancient to modern times. So if you go into Greek time period, what was the notion of political obligation there? Take Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. Plain and simple, state is natural. State comes for the sake of life. It continues for the sake of good life. State is a reflection of God. What Hegel told, state is a march of God on earth. Then, secondly, you have people like Machiavelli. What is their notion of political obligation? Security. People need security. That is why they have to obey the prince. And that is how prince should rule. He should rule by what? Fear than to be loved. Third, you have people like Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, who speaks about social contract. And for Hobbes, what is the basis of political obligation? He says, come out of the state of nature. What is state of nature? State of nature is selfish. Sorry, what is that? Short, nasty, brutish, short. For Locke, it is what? Matter of inconveniences. To come out of these inconveniences, people will have to obey the state. And you have people like Gramsci and Marxist. They say that the notion of political obligation itself is only false premised. They say that it is nothing but it's an idea that has been established by the liberals to manufacture the consent or the hegemony. Or you can also speak about medieval period where you had divine theory of rights, where you can say you have to obey the state or obey the king because king is a replica of God. King is the march of God on earth. Then you can say in modern times, you have newer ways of bringing political obligation, like T.H. Green says that will not force is the basis of state, meaning the state should perform welfare functions. When the state performs welfare functions, the people will have to obey the state. Or you have, I think, who spoke about the concept of service state. I think it is Macpherson who gave the concept of service state. Means the state is performing certain services, such as providing education, health to people at large. And you can say in modern times, you can say legitimacy or political obligation is also gained through what modern tools, such as what elections, welfare functions, security, fundamental rights. So hence you can say that the idea of political obligation has always remained debatable in the field of political science, and it has evolved from the past where they believed that state was natural, state was a reflection of God, and today's time that state is more of a human creation and serving a human purpose. So here and all, you cannot just write from a book. You have to learn to be confident to write what you know. See, but sometimes why you don't write, because you don't feel confident enough whether what I'm thinking is right or wrong. Certain times you have to bring your thoughts on your paper, but for these kind of questions. Understood? That's why I told certain keywords are very, very important because they can ask on the same keyword in different ways. Understood? So these were largely the question which they've asked on Thomas Hobbes in recent times. So in tomorrow's class, we'll take up Locke means you prepare and come. Locke, J.S. Mill, Karl Marx, Gramsci, and Hannah Arendt. Because Hannah Arendt, Gramsci are two small thinkers. There is not, questions have been asked a lot, but themes are very less what they've asked. The only one thinker in that is very big is Karl Marx. And Locke is also, it's simple. That is social contract. J.S. Mill also, three major ideas are there. What is that? His views on democracy, his views on women suffrage, means women voting rights in that regard, his views on liberty. Largely the three things. So that you try to prepare and come for tomorrow's session. And tomorrow's session we'll try to go through those questions. And then we'll go into ideology, theories of state, liberty, democracy, because these are all interlinked. Understanding means now how they're asking question, they're not only asking on democracy. They're linking democracy with equality. They're linking democracy with power. You see you'll get to know tomorrow later when we solve questions. No longer they're asking only straightforward questions. They're asking largely applied questions. They're interlinking concept. So for that you have to be very good in your theoretical concept. You have to be very good in your application. You also have to prepare certain examples. Okay, what do I mean by examples? Let us take, there is a statement Ambedkar made. Political and legal democracy is meaningless without social and economic democracy. Now what will you write? What will you write? The question comes like this. So here don't forcefully think about which democratic theory will I read. Not required. It is not a theoretical answer. Plain and simple. First you need to explain your answer. What is political democracy? What is civil democracy? What is social democracy? What is economic democracy? Second part of your answer, you have to give examples. Why is it important? So there you can bring a Marxist perspective in your answer. You can bring an Ambedkar perspective in your answer. And you have to back it by examples. What is examples? You can say, for example, in India, 88%, according to Association of Democratic Reforms, ADR data, 88% of India's MPs are all crore-patis. It's a clear-cut indication that money power plays a very key role. Or second one, you can say that 46% of Indian parliamentarians have criminal background. Means it indicates the role of muscle power. Or you can say the reflection of Indian parliament, which has only 15% representation to women. It is clearly an indication of that there is social inequality that has not translated into what? Political equality. Or you can also speak about, even though reservations have been provided in panchayats to women, Sudha Pai has documented the evidences of Pati panchayats. So hence we can say that without social democracy, economic democracy, democracy as a value will not be meaningful when we look at in political sphere or in legal sphere. When I want to write about legal sphere, I can write the recent data shows that every 4 prisoners in India, out of them 2 of them are under trials. And you can say that in that 80% of those who are under trials, they are largely from economically weaker sections. So that is what you had a scholar who said that where is legal justice when one party is represented by the best barrister that money can buy, where the other party is represented by an average barrister that the money cannot afford. When you write like this in your answer, you are going to get more marks. Why? Because you are being very organic, you are being very applied. But let us say you start thinking social democracy, what theory will I write? There is no theory here. It's an application based question. For this you will have to have examples. Got it? So this is how the current exam trend has been changing. You have to be also with the current trend. You have to give current examples. That's where you have to collect examples and keep it. Where I can use it, where I can give it. Understood? So that we will get to know once we start solving more number of questions where we can do value addition to certain data, to certain, what you can say, concepts that we'll be doing. Okay. So tomorrow we'll take up what? Thinkers, remember, prepare comment on what? One is Locke, the other is Mill, the other is Marx, Gramsci and Hannah Arendt. Any other doubt you have here in this part, what we have done? Any other question you are not able to answer? So if you have any such questions, get it, that we'll try to solve it in class. Means if you are solving some question which you are not able to break through, you get it to class, I'll get it solved.